I would like to welcome Gabby Cohen, who is the global head of integrated marketing and communications for Harry's. So welcome, Gabby.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for joining us. Now, Gabby, you've had a very interesting career path. I know you most recently came to Harry's from Rent the Runway, and you spent some time at SoulCylce before that. So if you could just tell us a little bit about your career journey and then a little bit more about Harry's, the business.
Sure. So my career really started in hospitality, to be honest. I was the front desk at Club Med post-college when I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, but got the bug for hospitality and customer experience and customer service. And I really do think that's been the through line of my career in some sort of way without being overt. I got recruited to SoulCylce, after being in PR for hotels and destinations. And it was really my love of hospitality. I think for them, that was the draw, was really around creating magical experiences and telling wonderful stories. I spent 8 years at SoulCylce. I call myself the SoulCylce sieve. So if it fell through the cracks, I caught it and sort of figured it out. It helped to scale almost every area of the business, from 4 studios to over 90 when I left.
Wow.
It was an incredible journey and worked with some of the most incredible people that are really, like family to me to this day. After 8 years of working in a 24-hour, 365-day business, I knew I had to get off the flywheel, no pun intended, or else I would have probably stayed there forever and lost all my sense of well-being despite being at a fitness business. So I actually consulted for Harry's during that time. I helped them launch Flamingo, which was their first foray into a women's brand and was their first sort of incubated launch outside of the Harry's brand. Spent a great summer working with them, getting Flamingo off the ground, and had the opportunity to be the chief brand officer at Rent the Runway, which was really, at the time, something I couldn't turn down. It was really around behavior change of buying clothes to really renting clothes, and not just the idea of renting for occasion, but really this everyday rental, right? It was about being a utility tool for women and using a closet in the cloud versus, wearing what you have in your own closet, and a way to get access to incredible clothes at a really affordable price, while also being sustainable. So I, after 2 amazing years, and, obviously with the pandemic, the business had taken quite a bit of a stall. I decided to move on and started, chatting with my friends over at Harry's again, and was, on a consulting for a while. And then, after, several months of that, said, all right, guys, I'm not leaving. I'm going to stay. And so that's so thrilled to be back with the team at Harry's. And listen, I think the business it's a really exciting time. Harry's Inc. is so much more than I think what often people think of as, a razor brand, which is unbelievable. But what started as really a men's razor brand has expanded to 4 businesses, which are Harry's, Flamingo, their women's brand, which is really women's body care, and, holistic body care. Cat Person, which is a cat care brand. And we just launched Headquarters, which is a holistic 4-step scalp and root care brand. So it's, and we have a labs business that will be incubating and acquiring new brands. And so there's so much exciting things happening within the Harry's business. We'll continue to acquire and incubate new brands, which is something that I'll be a part of, while also scaling our existing businesses and just, creating more market share and more opportunity with our existing brands through retail, through DTC, and then launching new products with under that umbrella. The team is incredible and really a wonderful group of people, and just pumped to be here.
Excellent. I know you have a pretty robust, you mentioned direct to consumer business, and then also you're selling through retail, because I see your brand in Costco when I go to Costco shopping. So talk about that balance between direct to consumer versus retail.
So the business started as a real D2C business and then expanded into Target many years ago. And now, our launch of Headquarters was launched with Walmart. So it launched at the same time with Walmart and on direct to consumer. Cat Person is direct to consumer at this point, but we'll continue to, we'll think about retail in the future. Flamingo is in Target at this point. And then, Harry's is in Costco, is in Sam's Club, is in CVS, Kroger, Walmart. And, I think we see opportunity for all of our brands to expand into retail. And really, I think what's unique about Harry's, it's really an omni-channel retail or an omni-channel business that you can access both DTC and at, several retailers around the country and across the world.
Neat. I assume you're still a SoulCycle and a Rent the Runway enthusiast, even if you're not still working on the brands. Is that right?
Listen, I think I still bleed yellow. I think it would be hard for me not to after 8 years. I certainly miss going to in-person classes at the same frequency as I did, but I'll, go into the city and do an outdoor class with Sue Molnar at Hudson Yards when I can. And, I listen to the playlist when I can. And, it's just been, listen, and to me, still an incredible community. And, outside of that, Rent the Runway, like I was renting all my jackets throughout the winter. Why buy anything anymore?
Right. Right. And especially being in the metro New York City area where closets aren't quite as big as maybe other parts of the country, it makes sense to have that closet in the cloud idea versus having, a huge wardrobe in-house, so to speak.
Listen, I think it makes sense for so many reasons, regardless. Yes, I think with the continued, we had massive urbanization. I think it had probably stalled. Hopefully people will be coming back to cities post-COVID. But with that, I think we have, closet spaces at a premium, and it's really important to, maximize your space. So the less that you own, the less you have to store. But I also think it's just a more sustainable way to live, right? Like sharing a wardrobe, especially things that you're going to wear once or twice. Like why ever would you own that and have that, take up real estate in your closet?
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So I love to ask this question. What do you wish, what's a piece of advice you wish you'd gotten earlier in your career, or what advice would you give to somebody that's a little younger in their career, maybe starting out?
I think stop worrying about what's next. Like just focus on what's now. I think I spent so much time being like, what's next for me? What am I supposed to do next? Like, what does my career look like? And versus just like, put your head down, do great work, and that will come. I do think we get like mired in like my career ladder and growth. And sometimes it's just about like doing exactly what's in front of you.
Absolutely. So I believe that every person has a superpower, and I'm just curious what your superpower is.
So if you ask my old boss, Melanie Whelan, she says my superpower is the ability to connect with anyone or sometimes inanimate objects. But I think I have an ability to find a commonality with whoever I'm connecting to or talking to. And that has been really, it's unnerving. It unnerves people in a good way, right? Like it takes people's blood pressure down, and like just finding a moment of connectivity is really helpful.
Excellent. So where do you find inspiration for your team?
I'm a voracious reader of everything. Like I would say I'm a voracious, probably media consumer. And I feel confident in saying, I think I consume more media than anyone else on the planet, whether it's like, and I'm always doing 10 things at once. Like I'm listening to a podcast while I'm running, while I'm taking a call, I'm reading an article in the paper, while I'm also watching the news, while I'm like, so I do tend to take in a lot of information, and that to me is really inspiring, and that like, it'll give me a spark for an idea for something else. And then running, to be honest, like I get my best ideas when I'm running. I think there's something about when I'm not listening to a podcast, that I can quiet my brain, and there's that moving meditation, and it gets me out, and SoulCycle too. It gets me outside of myself to then really say like, oh my God, that's what we should do. And I truly would like keep a pad next to me sometimes in SoulCycle classes, because I would have really great ideas that would come out of being on the bike.
Yeah, I mean, some people when they're in the shower or running or whatever, but why not while you're doing SoulCycle? Yeah. Makes total sense. Makes total sense. And so in terms of we're emerging from a global pandemic now. People are getting vaccinated, and by the time this airs, hopefully it's well past us. But beyond, CPG has done fairly well during the pandemic because people are stuck at home. So I'm wondering, other than pandemic, what is the biggest challenge that you're facing as a marketer?
I think there's just a lot of noise. Listen, there's just a lot of noise. I think people are exhausted from, it's like information overload. And I think, so it's almost like some people have gone so far to the left to like shut it down, that I think that's problem, and trust, right? Like I think consumers and people have somewhat lost trust in the world to a degree. So I think it's like really gaining trust back. I think it's really being able to break through. I think it's true connectivity. Like, I think it's interesting. I saw a story the other day that was like, brands have vowed not to market products for Mother's Day. And I just found that really powerful. It's like,
Hmm.
in a way, like, let's try not to use all the holidays as a way to sell product. No, and let's think about it just as a way to say thank you to our customers and sell product on another day, but
Yeah.
don't do it on like on holidays that like people hold as sacred. So I do think there's like a whole swing to say like, to just think about how we communicate with our customers differently.
Mm-hmm.
And
Well,
sometimes just say thank you.
absolutely. I mean, we all know though that President's Day is the time to buy a new car. Like
Right.
it's like at what point do we? My son came to me and asked me. He said we should have off for school for every holiday. And I said a lot of those holidays are made up, buddy. He goes, I
Right.
know.
Yeah. No, thank you. We need you in school.
Right. Excellent. All right. So I want to talk just about leadership for a minute. What are the most important values that either you want to exhibit to your team or that you look for when you're hiring somebody to join your team?
I always believe in finding the yes. And it doesn't mean at your expense, but it means that you come from a yes mindset. And there's this like sense, and I really learned this at SoulCylce, was like, figure it out. Just figure it out. Be entrepreneurial. Don't ask like 100,000 questions. Ask some questions, get clarity, but then go and come back to me if you need me. I think that's how I learned, and I think it's really something I'm looking for in my team. I think open and honest conversation is really important, and giving and receiving feedback. Like as a leader, I want to know how I'm doing, like, and how can I do better? I think I'm always learning, and the same for my team. I also think your development is not, I find this a lot, is that as a, both myself and in my team members, is that development is a two-way street. And that your teams have to be as engaged in how they can develop and grow versus like expecting a roadmap that your boss is going to give you in how to develop and grow. And listen, I think the one thing, I wear a necklace every day that says be kind. If I've learned anything, it's just be kind. Treat people like you want to be treated. Treat like, and I'm talking everyone. Like I would often take people when I was interviewing them to a SoulCylce class because I wanted to see how they treated the front desk. And I wanted to see how they treated the cleaning staff. They are equally as important, if not more important, than everyone else in that room. And it's the same way as going to get a cup of coffee. Like, are they saying, yeah, please and thank you? Those things matter.
Absolutely. And you answered the question to an extent about how how do you coach and mentor your team? But you mentioned immediate feedback is key, like versus waiting till later. But what other ways do you coach and mentor your team?
So radical candor, apologize. I live by JFK now. So we have a constant flow of planes, trains, automobiles.
It's not too loud.
Yeah. Radical Candor was a really helpful book in how I communicate with my team. And so part of it was really like getting to know people to get to know them, like what motivates them, where they're from, what they like to do outside of work. Like I could ask a million questions about people, whether it's through the interview process or whether it's just as being part of my team. Like, because then we can have real honest conversations, because it's not the only time they hear from me is when I'm telling them what to do differently. And the same for me, like I'm pretty much an open book with my team, what I'm going through. If my babysitter's off that week, like, guys, my babysitter's off this week, I may be a little overly stressed. I just wanted you to know, because I do think we're all human. And we all make mistakes, and we all have other things going in our lives. And I think that's really important to be transparent, not overly transparent that you're like, crying at the office all the time, but just letting people know where you are and where you stand.
Yeah, I think maybe the pandemic has helped humanize us all as well, because we get to see each other in our living rooms, and our kids jump in the middle of a Zoom or Microsoft Teams or Google Meet or something like that, and we get to see people in their, as their whole selves versus just their work selves.
No, absolutely.
So,
completely agree.
So at Setup, we're matchmakers, we're marketing matchmakers, and that often means connecting brands and marketing agencies together. And so we have a little bit of a unique perspective on the kind of agency client relationship. We do an annual survey of the marketing relationship survey. And so I'm just curious how you work with marketing agencies today, or even in one of your past gigs.
Yeah, so we, we often bring on marketing agencies for projects. Harry, some of the brands, so each brand gets to, own their own agency relationships, which is awesome. I think it's not dictated by any one, piece of the organization. So I think that's great because it gives them freedom. So we work with marketing agencies on a variety of different things, whether it's, certainly on the paid side, SEO, whether it's on, influencers, a fair amount, we work with them. We do work with PR agencies for every single one of our brands, affiliate marketing. So it really depends, I think, and it depends on the needs of the business. I've always worked with agencies. For a long time at SoulCylce, I did everything in-house. And then over time, you're like, okay, it's just, we can't continue to build the capabilities for all of these things that we need in-house. So it depends on whether it's like a monthly retainer base or project base. It does switch based on the needs of the business.
Are there certain things that you would never, ever outsource to an agency? And are there certain things you would always outsource no matter what, if you could?
I'd say never say never. I think it depends the scale of the business. I think it depends on the needs. I think even on the experiential side, like at SoulCylce, I had an in-house experiential team because we were doing a ton of it, but for, maybe for Harry's, that doesn't actually make sense because we're not doing enough of it. Right. So I think it really depends on like what the needs of the business are. And then you sort of make those decisions based on that.
Great. So in terms of marketing results, sometimes marketing is misunderstood by other parts of the organization. I'm just curious how you show the value of what marketing delivers to the non-marketing folks in your organization or even outside of the organization.
What I really try to do going into a project is say, like, what are our what we're trying to get out of it. I think to be really clear on what the KPIs are. And sometimes you'll say it's going to be brand awareness and we can try to measure it, but we know it's going to be a little bit challenging, or it's going to be press impressions, or it's going to be specific market lift. But I think to be really clear on what your expected outcomes are and then circle back on those, because without that, I think you're shooting in the dark. So I do think I'd like to be, really clear, like this is what we're doing. Here's why we're doing it. And let's measure that.
I like the idea of different measurements for different initiatives, because in some cases, like if it's a press initiative, you might be looking for mentions in an article or something like that. Whereas if it's lead gen, then it's a very different,
totally different. Yeah. Sometimes you're like, we're solely focused on customer acquisition on this and reducing our CAC. We're solely focused on just creating buzz in Atlanta. We're solely focused on driving sales at Target. Like I think you have to be really specific, because at the end of the day, it's not going to work for all, like not one initiative is gonna be like, we're going to hit all of these buttons.
Right. So is there a specific program or campaign either at Harry's or even at Rent the Runway or SoulCylce or in your past that taught you something super valuable, either because it was a huge success or because it was a flop and you learned something that you'll use forever?
Oh, yes, I have my favorite. So at SoulCylce, we launched a SoulCylce cookie with Milk Bar with Christina Tosi called Soul Fuel. And the whole idea was like a really healthy cookie filled with macadamia nuts and like healthy oils. And it was like a great pre or post item. Commercially, it was an absolute fail. Nobody bought the cookie. We had so much press out of the cookie. So I think what we did was a mistake going in saying like, we're going to sell this. We feel confident in our sales. Like at the end of the day, we should have said, we have no idea if we're going to sell cookies, but we know we're going to get a lot of press out of it. So we got a ton of press, sold no cookies. But at the end of the day, and I remember my team member who it was her idea and it was her baby, and she was really bummed that the cookies didn't sell. And I said, listen, you crushed it on the press side, and that is good enough. Don't tell yourself that it wasn't a commercial success.
And you were able to donate lots of cookies.
Yeah, and everyone's happy.
That's amazing. Okay. I have a couple of fun questions for you that have nothing to do with marketing necessarily, although one does. Actually, I'll ask the one that's related to marketing first, then we'll get to the others. Is there a brand that you've never worked on that you really admire, and why do you admire it?
It was the hat I was wearing. I am a diehard Patagonia fan.
Yeah,
it has been my brand. I mean, literally, hello, my fanny pack.
Patagonia, everything. Yeah.
It is my brand. I've loved them for years. Also, I have to say, I also love Cotopaxi, and I also wear their fanny packs often. But I think, Patagonia for me has been like a brand that has stood by their values, put their values before making money, and they still make money. But like what I love, and I always tell my team member, I'll forward them the emails that I get. Like I get emails from them that have nothing to do with me buying anything. It's just like really interesting stories. And I just appreciate how, I mean, you can return an item from them at any time and get a full like credit for that item and buy something new. I just think they like think about the customer journey. They think about customers. They aren't like innate marketers in that they just talk to you like you're a human being. And and their product's incredible.
Yeah. And they have a larger mission for the company, which is about the environment and being outdoors in the environment more than about selling a piece of clothing or something like that.
And they were, I think, one of the first that really thought about employee branding without even thinking about employee branding, right? Like they just were like the way they thought about taking care of their employees, like in terms of like having daycare on site, they just were like far and away ahead of that. And I think as someone who's purchasing that matters to me if I'm buying their product, the fact that like they take such good care of their employees.
Absolutely. I love it. So, and also I loved, they did a whole program where they tried to get people to bring their old Patagonia stuff to be repaired. Where
it's
they
amazing.
Actually sew up the old thing and give it back to you.
And then they have worn wear now, which you can buy used Patagonia product, which is amazing if you haven't been on the site. And I've bought now like another 10x more items than I normally would because it's at a discount and it's like, who cares?
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so what is there a book or a band or a movie or a quote that really inspires you?
I'm a diehard Indigo Girls fan.
So Indigo Girls from here in Atlanta, Georgia.
Yes, of course. So I've flown down to Atlanta with my mother to see the Indigo Girls play with your symphony in Atlanta. They are like, they're it for me. Like the sun rises and sets. I basically follow them like people followed the dead.
That's amazing. Yeah. And is there a particular song or album that just does it for you more than any other?
I mean, they had it was a 1000 Curfews. It was a compilation album and it's a lot of it is live music, but my favorite song that they do, well, it's two. They do a cover of Uncle John's Band. That's amazing.
And Grateful Dead tune.
Another Grateful Dead. And I love the Dead. And they do a cover of Midnight Train to Georgia. And and when like, I'm one of these, like, I do feel like they speak to me, and I was at a concert and they had a lot of extra people on stage. Like I could just tell. And I literally turned to my friend and I heard them do it once before. I said, they're going to do Midnight Train to Georgia. I just know it. And they played Midnight Train to Georgia because they do it with like an expanded group. And it's one of the best covers that ever exists.
Amazing. Amazing. All right. So this one's a silly question. Is there a fictional story or realm in which you would like to live?
Yes, I told you I knew the answer to this before. I want to be one of the rats in Muppets Take Manhattan. They ice skate on the butter. And it is one of my favorite movies of all time. We call them, my college roommate and I call them butter skates. And they just skate on the butter while making pancakes at the diner.
Nice. I thought you were going to say one of the rats in Ratatouille, but
no, deeper.
Deeper. Nice.
Deeper in the archives.
All right. Final question, Gabby. Is there something that I didn't ask you that I should have asked you as part of this conversation?
I'm a crazy dog person. That's it. I talk to dogs on the street. I have 2 dogs. I'm like a wild dog lover. And I think that besides I'm that person who comes home and I ask the babysitter, how did they do? And I was talking about the dogs, not my children.
And so your 2 dogs, are they a particular breed or are they mixed?
Yeah,
pedigree?
One's a Maltese poodle before it was cool to have a hybrid. And now I have also a sheepadoodle, but I have a 7 and a 9-year-old children who I love deeply as well.
They're fine, but the dogs.
I was like, I don't care about the kids. How are the dogs?
I love it. I love it. All right. Well, Gabby, this has been such a pleasure. Gabby Cohen is the Global Head of Integrated Marketing and Communications for Harry's. Thank you so much for spending the time with me.
Thank you so much. It's been great.